I'm Lauren Bennett, 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed helping family was the highest virtue. That belief led me to buy a blue Craftsman house on Queen and Hill in Seattle, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, with wide windows that overlook Elliott Bay and a front porch framed by white hydrangeas. I bought it 3 years ago for $745,000 with a fixed mortgage of $3,210 a month. At the time, it felt like a dream, proof that I had made it. I was working as a marketing director for a tech firm in South Lake Union, pulling in a 6-figure salary and finally standing on my own 2 feet. Then Dad lost his job at the logistics company where he'd worked for almost 20 years. Mom said they'd only need a few months to get back on their feet. I agreed, without hesitation. They moved into my guest room with 2 suitcases and a promise that they'd contribute once Dad found new work. My sister, Madison, joined a few weeks later after breaking up with her boyfriend. She said it would be temporary, but temporarily stretched into 3 years. At first, I didn't notice how much of my life was being siphoned away. I paid the water, electric, gas, and internet bills, along with groceries for 4 adults. I covered small repairs, then big ones, a $3,200 roof patch after a leak, $9,600 for new windows. It wasn't that they refused to help. It was that they didn't even pretend to try. When I came home from work, they were watching TV, the sink was full, and takeout boxes sat on the counter. Madison spent hours on social media or FaceTiming her fiancé, Evan Clark, a private equity consultant who lived in Portland. Every so often, I'd remind myself that it was family, that I could afford it, that it was only fair after all my parents had done for me growing up. But that reasoning started to crack each time I opened my bank app and saw how much was leaving my account to support people who didn't seem to notice. One Sunday night in late spring, I cooked lemon chicken and a salad. The table was set with tulips in a glass vase and my grandmother's china. It was supposed to be a normal dinner, a small family meal. The golden light from the sunset stretched across the dining room walls, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe the evening would be peaceful. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Lauren, we need to talk about something important." The tone made my stomach tighten. He glanced at Mom, then at Madison, who was scrolling on her phone. Dad said, "Your sister's wedding is coming up fast. There's been a budget issue. We need your help." "Help with what exactly?" I asked. "The venue deposit and catering," Mom said. "About $28,000. You're doing well, and it would mean a lot if you covered the remaining expenses." I froze. "You're asking me to pay $28,000 for her wedding?" Madison smirked. "It's not just for me. It's for the family. You'll be proud when people see how beautiful it is." Her tone dripped with that same smugness she'd worn since we were kids, the one that said she knew she'd get her way. I tried to keep calm. "You've lived here rent-free for 3 years. I've covered everything. I'm not paying for a wedding, too." Dad leaned forward, his voice tightening. "Don't start with attitude. We're a family. Families help each other." Mom added, "If you can't even support your own sister on her special day, maybe you should think about what kind of person that makes you." The words hit like a slap. I stared at my plate, the lemon chicken suddenly cold. "And if I say no?" Dad didn't hesitate. "Then you're choosing to step away from the family." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's fork clinked against her plate, and I caught that tiny smirk again. The one who said she'd won. I couldn't speak. My pulse hammered in my ears. My mind spun through every bill I'd paid, every grocery trip, every month of carrying 4 adults on one income. I excused myself and went upstairs, locking the door behind me. That night, I sat in the dark living room long after everyone went to bed. The only light came from the street lamp outside, glowing faintly through the blinds. I looked around my house, my furniture, my walls, my mortgage, and realized how little of it actually felt like mine anymore. It had become a shelter for everyone but me. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop. I typed "Family Boundaries Therapist Seattle" into the search bar. The next morning, before work, I booked my first session with a woman named Dr. Harper. $180 for 50 minutes. I didn't care about the cost. I needed a voice that wasn't drowning in guilt or obligation. Over the next few days, I watched the house differently. Mom filled my new hand towels with bleach, then shrugged when I said they were ruined. Madison borrowed my car just for errands and returned it with an empty tank. Dad made comments about how this house was too big for one person anyway. Each small slight layered over the next until my chest felt heavy with resentment. The day of my therapy session, I parked outside a brick building with ivy crawling up the side. Inside, Dr. Harper listened as I explained everything: the bills, the guilt, the ultimatum. She nodded gently and asked, "What would it look like if you stopped carrying all of it?" The question hit harder than I expected. I realized I didn't even know what my life looked like without the weight of everyone else's needs. That evening, I came home to find Madison opening a package that had my name on it. She waved a hand dismissively. "Relax, I thought it was mine." Something inside me shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just walked past her, up the stairs, and closed my bedroom door. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for pulling away. I felt clear. That night, I sat in bed and opened my journal. I wrote one sentence: "If they're going to cut me off, maybe it's time I cut myself free." And just like that, the first thread of my old life began to unravel. Therapy gave me language for things I'd only ever felt as a tightness in my chest. Dr. Harper sat across from me in a calm, gray office with soft lighting and a small plant on her desk. "Boundaries," she said during our second session, "aren't about punishment. They're about clarity." She asked me to write down everything I'd paid for in the last 3 years: mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, even the extra furniture I'd bought when my family moved in. When I added it up, the total came to over $62,000. "Look at that number," she said gently. "That's not generosity. That's survival at your expense." I stared at the paper until the ink blurred. I'd always told myself I was being kind, but that number looked more like a slow erosion of self. Dr. Harper leaned forward. "If you stopped carrying everyone, what would your life look like?" I didn't know. That answer scared me more than anything. That night, I sat in my kitchen and drafted a letter on plain white paper. My hands shook, but I kept writing. "I will not be paying for Madison's wedding. I am asking everyone to move out within 30 days. I signed my name and dated it. Then I stared at the words, knowing they would change everything. The next morning, I taped the letter to the refrigerator door. I brewed coffee and waited until everyone was awake. Mom was the first to see it. She squinted at the page, then turned toward me. "What's this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, keeping my voice calm, "that I need my home back. I'll give each of you 30 days to move. I'll even help with security deposits and movers. But I can't keep doing this." Dad's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "I'm setting a boundary." He laughed under his breath. "You've been talking to that therapist, haven't you? You think you're better than your own family now." "No," I said softly. "I just think I deserve peace." Mom crossed her arms. "You're ungrateful. We raised you. We gave you everything." I swallowed hard. "And I've spent 3 years giving everything back. Now I'm done." Madison appeared on the stairs, her phone still in hand. "Wow," she said. "You'd really kick out your own parents before my wedding? Evan was right. You're impossible." Her words stung, but I didn't let them stick. "This isn't about your wedding. It's about boundaries." "You just don't want me to be happy," she snapped. I looked her in the eye. "You've been happy at my expense for a long time." Dad pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood. "You'll regret this, Lauren. Family doesn't forget betrayal." I didn't answer. I simply handed each of them a typed notice with the same date and terms. I offered $2,400 per household for moving assistance and a list of rental options under $1,800 a month. Then I walked upstairs before the shouting could begin. Later that afternoon, I mailed certified copies of the same notice, just to make it legal. I also called a locksmith and booked a rekeying appointment for the day after their move-out deadline. It felt ruthless. It also felt necessary. Within 48 hours, the phone started ringing nonstop. Aunt Cheryl from Ohio called, furious. How could you abandon your own parents? They're telling everyone you threw them out like trash. I took a breath. I didn't abandon them. I gave them 30 days and moving money. She didn't want to hear it. None of them did. Text messages flooded in, filled with guilt, threats, and gossip. Madison must have told everyone. Screenshots started circulating through the family group chat, my name paired with words like selfish and cold-hearted. I responded once, briefly. These are lies. I wish them all well. I just need space. Then I muted the conversation and let the noise fade. A few days later, an unexpected message appeared from Evan Clark, my sister's fiancé. He asked if we could meet for coffee, saying he wanted to hear my side. I almost ignored him, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a small cafe near Lake Union. He looked nervous, holding a paper cup like it might burn him. Madison told me you refused to help and kicked everyone out, he began carefully. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were my receipts, utility bills, and a spreadsheet summarizing what I'd spent over 3 years. This is what I've contributed. I also offered them moving funds and resources. He flipped through the pages slowly, his brow tightening. This is a lot. I'm not asking for pity, I said. I'm just done living like this. He set the papers down. You're not the person Madison described. I know, I said quietly. He gave a small nod, thoughtful. Thank you for showing me this. Then he stood, left his half-finished coffee, and walked out without another word. The following week was heavy. Mom alternated between icy silence and sudden guilt trips. Dad muttered about disrespectful children. Madison slammed doors and called me names when she passed in the hallway. I tried to tune it out. Each night, I repeated the words Dr. Harper had given me. You're allowed to protect your peace. On the 29th day, a moving van rumbled into my driveway. I stood on the porch as boxes were loaded. Dad avoided eye contact. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Madison barely spoke. When the last box was strapped down, I handed Dad an envelope with a cashier's check for $2,400. This is for both of you, I said, to help with the move. He took it without a word. I offered the same to Madison. She crossed her arms and glared. Keep your charity. You'll regret this when the wedding comes. I didn't respond. By sunset, the driveway was empty. The house was silent, eerily so. I walked through each room. The echoes were strange after years of noise. When the locksmith arrived, I watched as he replaced every lock. The sound of new keys clicking into place felt like the start of something unfamiliar but freeing. That night, I lit a candle, made tea, and took the longest shower of my life. For the first time in years, I slept with my phone on silent. No guilt, no tension, just quiet. In the morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor. It was the same house, but it finally felt like home again. The weeks after everyone moved out were quiet in a way that felt both healing and haunting. I woke up to silence instead of raised voices or the sound of the TV humming in the living room. I could hear birds outside the window and the faint hum of morning traffic rolling down Queen and Avenue. The air inside my house finally felt like mine. I started small. I opened the windows to let the house breathe, washed the curtains, and filled the rooms with the smell of lemon cleaner and fresh paint. I bought a cedar planter box for the back deck and planted herbs, basil, mint, and thyme. Each morning, I'd step outside with coffee and mist them with water, watching how new leaves unfurled under the Seattle sun. It became my ritual, my way of telling myself I was still growing, too. For the first time in years, I had money left at the end of the month. I started a new budget, one written only for me. I put $1,000 each month into savings and finally paid off my last $4,800 in student loans. The day I clicked pay in full, I cried, not because of the money, but because it felt like reclaiming part of myself that had been buried under everyone else's needs. Therapy helped too. Dr. Harper said healing isn't about forgetting, it's about unlearning. We talked about guilt, about how I was raised to believe saying no was cruel. She told me guilt was the echo of old rules, not proof that I was wrong. That sentence stayed with me. By late summer, my life had found a quiet rhythm. I was cooking again simple, nourishing things like chicken soup and roasted vegetables. I had dinner with coworkers, joined a weekend book club, and even took a solo trip to Bainbridge Island just to walk by the water. It was peaceful, but part of me wondered how long that peace would last. Then one afternoon, I opened the door and froze. Madison was standing on my porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, pale, tired, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun. She clutched a tote bag and tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside and gestured toward the couch. She sat down slowly, like someone carrying an invisible weight. After a long silence, she said, "I'm pregnant." My breath caught. I hadn't seen her in nearly 4 months. She looked at me, her eyes glassy. "Evan postponed the wedding. He said he needs time to reconsider things." She made air quotes around the word reconsider. "He's not answering my calls, and I can't stay with Mom and Dad. I just need a little help, just enough to get by for now. Maybe a few thousand for a deposit, some baby things maybe." The old reflex stirred inside me, the one that whispered, "Help her, fix it, save her." But another voice spoke louder this time, one I'd been learning to listen to. "I'm really sorry you're going through this," I said carefully, "but I can't give you money." Her head snapped up. "You're serious? You have a house, a good job, savings, you can't even help your own sister?" "I'm willing to help in other ways," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've already looked up resources for situations like this." She frowned. "Resources?" I went to my desk and returned with a folder. Inside were printed sheets, information about WIC, Medicaid, King County rental support, community health clinics, and a job program run by a nonprofit downtown. I also included contact details for a financial counseling center that helps single mothers manage debt. "I can make calls with you if you want," I said. "And I got 2 grocery cards and a bus pass for you, too." Madison pushed the folder away like it was an insult. "You really think I want handouts? You're unbelievable. Evan was right, you're cold. You act like you're above everyone." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. This isn't about being above anyone. It's about what I can give without losing myself again. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. "You've changed, Lauren." "Yes," I said softly. "I have." She stood up, grabbed her bag, and left without another word. I stood at the window as she walked down the driveway, shoulders hunched, the sunlight flickering through the trees as if uncertain whether to follow her. That night, I placed the folder in an envelope and mailed it to the address she had used months ago in Tacoma. A week later, I found the envelope missing from my porch, where I'd left a duplicate copy. Maybe she came back for it. Maybe the wind took it. I didn't need to know. By fall, bits of news trickled in through the family grapevine. Mom had started working part-time at a garden center in Ballard for $18 an hour, helping customers pick perennials and houseplants. Dad got a dispatch job at a trucking yard near SeaTac, handling night shifts. Madison was using a midwife clinic and had applied for a housing program for single mothers. I listened to these updates with quiet relief, not joy, not bitterness, just relief. They were standing on their own. Finally, my own life blossomed in small, unremarkable ways. I bought a vintage desk for the spare room and turned it into an office. I learned how to cook a whole chicken for $10 that could stretch into 2 dinners and a pot of soup. I read books, walked Green Lake on weekends, and stopped checking social media for signs of family gossip. Peace no longer felt like a luxury, it felt like oxygen. In early October, I met my parents for coffee at a small cafe in Fremont. It was the first time I'd seen them since they moved out. The conversation stayed safely on the surface. Work, weather, the Seahawks. No one mentioned the wedding or the checks or the months of silence that had stretched between us. The calm was fragile, like a layer of ice thin enough to see the water beneath, but it held. When I left the cafe, Mom hugged me. It was brief and stiff, but it was something. As I drove home, the city lights reflected on the windshield, and for the first time in a long while, I realized I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt grounded, anchored to a life I'd built with my own 2 hands. I parked in my driveway, unlocked the door, and breathed in the quiet. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and fresh paint. I smiled to myself. Peace, I realized, wasn't about everyone else finally changing. It was about me not losing myself waiting for them to. Winter in Seattle has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. The rain fell in gentle sheets that turned the streets into mirrors, and Queen and Avenue glowed with Christmas lights strung between lampposts. My little blue house smelled of pine and cinnamon. For the first time in years, December didn't feel like a countdown, it felt like calm. I bought a small tree for the living room, a modest pine that barely reached my shoulder, and strung it with white lights. I made cocoa at night, wrapped myself in a blanket, and listened to the sound of rain against the windows. I'd been saving a little each month, and that week, I finally did something I hadn't dared before. I booked a 3-day trip to Santa Barbara in January. $620 round trip, hotel included. It felt like a promise to myself, a declaration that life could be soft again. Then, one gray afternoon, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was an unknown number, followed by a photo, a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket, with a tuft of dark hair and a little hand curled near her cheek. No caption. A moment later, another message appeared. She came early. We named her Hope. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the screen as the letters blurred. Hope. It was the one thing I'd been learning to hold against, and now it had a face. My niece. My sister's child. I wrote back simply, "She's beautiful. Congratulations. I'll drop off diapers and a warm blanket this week." A minute later, a heart emoji appeared. Just one. Not an apology. Not reconciliation. But a beginning. I took it for what it was. A window cracked open in a house I'd thought was sealed forever. The weeks that followed moved gently. Madison sent small updates now and then, nothing deep, just glimpses. A photo of Hope sleeping, a note saying she'd gotten into a local assistance program. I never pried. I just replied with kindness. Mom sent me a recipe for lemon bars, like old times. Dad texted a picture of a sunrise from his new job's parking lot, saying, "Not a bad view to start the day." It was progress, fragile but real. I kept up therapy too. Dr. Harper said peace is not a permanent state. It's something you renew daily. I began to understand what she meant. I still had bad nights when guilt and anger flickered like ghosts in the dark. But each morning, I'd remind myself, I can love them and still protect myself. In February, I turned the spare room into something new. I painted the walls a pale sage green and set up a second-hand desk by the window, overlooking the bay. On one side, I placed a rocking chair I found at a thrift store, a sturdy wooden one with a few scratches and a gentle creak. I didn't know who would sit in it, but it felt right to make space for quiet, for reflection, maybe even for family again someday. By early spring, I'd paid off the last $1,200 on my credit card. When the confirmation email came through, I filed it under a folder I'd created on my desktop called Peace. The name made me smile every time I saw it. Life began to feel normal again, or at least my new version of normal. I'd go to work, come home, cook, water my herbs, and fall asleep to the steady rhythm of rain. The house no longer echoed with resentment. It held warmth now, just enough for one person, and the promise of better days. Then, on a quiet Saturday night, my phone buzzed again. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, the warm water running over my hands. The screen lit up with another unknown number. The message read, "We've noticed recent activity on your account. If you did not request a change of address, please contact us immediately." I frowned. The name of the financial institution looked familiar, but the account didn't. It wasn't one I recognized. For a moment, my old anxiety came roaring back, like an echo of the years I'd spent cleaning up other people's messes. I rinsed the soap from my hands and took a steadying breath. Don't react. Review. That was one of Dr. Harper's lessons. I opened the message again and noticed an attachment, a PDF labeled verification form. Curious, I tapped it open. The document appeared to be a scan of an authorization request, the kind you'd use to access funds or transfer an account. My stomach dropped. It had my name typed across the top, and a signature that looked disturbingly like mine. Not exact, but close enough to fool someone glancing fast. Below it was an address I'd never lived at, a townhouse in Tacoma. The same city where Madison had moved after leaving my place. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The quiet of the house pressed in around me. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. I saved the file, printed a copy, and slid it into my folder labeled legal. I sat at the kitchen table, my heart pounding but my mind calm. Old me would have called, crying, begging for explanations. New me knew better. I opened my laptop and searched the public records database. Within minutes, I found what I feared, a new joint account application under my full name, pending verification. The co-applicant's name hadn't been redacted. It was there, clear as day. Madison Clark. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone used her information, too. But deep down I knew. Madison had always blurred the line between mine and hers. She'd once used my credit card, just until payday. She'd always believed I'd fix what she broke. But not this time. I took another breath and began writing an email to my bank's fraud department, to a legal advisor I'd met through work, and to Dr. Harper. My hands shook, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From clarity. Before I went to bed, I checked on the rocker in the spare room. The moonlight from the window fell across its surface, soft and silver. I thought of baby Hope and the small, fragile piece I'd built. This wasn't the ending I'd planned. It wasn't even the start of a new fight. It was a test of how much I'd learned to protect myself. I whispered to the quiet room, "I can handle this." The calm had been real, but now I understood. It wasn't the end of the story. It was only the pause before the next storm. And this time, I wasn't afraid to face it.